Hello and welcome, dear listeners. If you are new here, please like and subscribe to our channel and leave a comment telling us where you are listening from. Today's story will help you improve your English listening and speaking skills, so make sure you listen carefully and enjoy. Remember to share your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's begin our journey together. It was a normal morning. I woke up early, as usual, to catch the bus. The sun had just begun to rise over the rooftops, and the sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange. My alarm clock rang at 6:30, and I reached over to switch it off. I sat up in bed and rubbed my eyes. The room was quiet, except for the sound of the wind outside. I took a deep breath and thought about the day ahead. I had an important meeting at work, and I needed to arrive on time. I got out of bed, stretched, and walked to the bathroom. The tiles were cool under my bare feet, and I ran cold water over my face. The mirror showed a tired face with dark circles under my eyes, but also a hint of determination. I brushed my teeth slowly, gazing at my reflection as if to prepare myself mentally for whatever might happen. After changing clothes, I headed to the small kitchen to prepare a quick breakfast. I boiled some water for tea and toasted a slice of bread. As I spread butter on the warm bread, I thought of the tasks I needed to complete today. The familiar routine brought a sense of comfort. After eating, I grabbed my bag and left the apartment. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and I locked it carefully. My shoes tapped on the hallway floor as I walked down the stairs. The building was old but well kept. Potted plants sat on each windowsill, and the walls were painted in a pale cream color. I could smell a faint hint of lavender from a neighbor's flower pot. The city felt calm in these early hours. My breath formed small clouds in the cool morning air as I stepped onto the street. The walk to the bus stop was peaceful. I enjoyed listening to the birds singing in the trees that lined the sidewalk. The pavement was still damp from the early morning dew, and small puddles reflected the rising sun. I moved at a steady pace, breathing deeply and feeling calm. The usual sounds of the city had not fully awakened yet. Occasional cars passed by, their tires making a gentle hiss on the wet pavement. The distant hum of early traffic slowly grew louder as I neared the main street. I checked my watch, 6:55. I would have a few minutes to spare at the bus stop. I took in a deep breath of cool air and savored the quiet before the day began in full swing. When I reached the bus stop, a handful of people were already waiting. There was a tall man in a dark coat reading a newspaper. His face was obscured by the folded pages, but I could see the way his eyebrows moved as he read. Beside him stood an elderly woman holding a small shopping bag. Her hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and she wore a light green scarf around her neck. They seemed absorbed in their own worlds, unaware of each other. The bus stop sign read, Bus 22 and Bus 30. I had been taking Bus 22 for years, and it took me directly to my office near the center of the city. I checked the timetable with my phone. The bus would arrive at 7 o'clock. It was now 6:57. Everything felt familiar and safe, until I noticed something that changed everything. Suddenly, I noticed someone standing a little further back from the group. The person wore a long, dark coat that looked too heavy for the spring morning. A hood covered most of their head, and their face was hidden in shadow. Their posture was stiff, and they seemed to be staring straight at me. That felt odd, because usually people at the bus stop looked at the road or at their phones. This stranger's attention felt like a gentle weight on my chest, and I felt a sudden chill. I blinked and looked again to be sure I was not mistaken. The stranger did not move. Their eyes, at least the sense of eyes, seemed to follow me. though I tried not to make it too obvious. The stranger's presence felt like a story unfolding in slow motion, and I couldn't tear my gaze away. At exactly 7 o'clock, the rumble of the bus engine broke the quiet of the morning. A large green and white bus appeared at the end of the street and slowly approached the stop. I felt relieved. I could put the uneasy feeling aside once I was on the bus. The driver braked, and the doors hissed open. People began to board quickly and quietly. The tall man with the newspaper folded it and stepped onto the bus. The elderly woman followed him, holding her bag carefully. I stepped forward as well, but just as my foot touched the platform of the bus, something unexpected happened. "Don't get on bus 22, the whisper said. I wanted to look at their face, but the hood kept their features hidden. The only thing I knew for sure was the voice had called me by name. It was the first and only time this person spoke. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it. The busy morning, the noise of the bus, the other people moving around, all that made my mind swirl. I looked at the driver through the bus's large front window. He raised an eyebrow as if he sensed my hesitation. Outside, the sky was a bright blue, and a few wispy clouds drifted lazily overhead. But inside me, there was only confusion and fear. My mind raced. Why would someone warn me not to get on the bus? I had been taking that bus every day for years. Nothing had ever happened. Maybe the stranger was playing a prank or making a mistake. Yet their tone was serious, and the name they used was my name. I felt a cold sweat on my back. The bus driver looked back at me, waiting for me to board. The tall man stepped into the bus's aisle, and the elderly woman smiled politely at the driver. I took a step toward the bus, but my feet felt heavy. I shook my head and tried to focus on the familiar routine, paying the fare, finding a seat near the window, and watching the city pass by. But the stranger's presence pulled me backward. "Please don't get on bus 22. It was the same words, the same low voice. I felt a wave of confusion mixed with fear. The passengers around me boarded quietly, unaware of the strange scene unfolding behind me. I breathed in slowly, counting to 3. I had to make a choice. Should I listen to the stranger and wait for the next bus, even if it meant being late to my meeting? Or should I carry on with my normal routine and ignore the warning? I closed my eyes and tried to calm my mind. The cool spring breeze drifted across the bus stop, rustling the leaves on the nearby trees. A bird chirped in the distance as if nothing was wrong in the world. My first instinct was to step back and refuse the bus. But then I thought of my job and the meeting. It was important. I reminded myself that everyone knew my name, and someone might be teasing me. Perhaps the stranger had seen me before. Maybe the person confused me with someone else. And who was that person, hiding under a heavy coat? Something did not add up. I opened my eyes and took another step toward the bus door. My hands clenched around the straps of my bag, and I felt my pulse beat stronger. The tension in my shoulders built as I moved forward, as if I was walking into the unknown. As soon as my foot touched the first step, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I jumped and turned around. The stranger was right behind me, their face still hidden. My heart pounded as I struggled to speak. "Who are you?" I whispered, though I knew they would not answer. The stranger did not move or speak again. Their hand tightened on my shoulder for a moment and then released me. I watched as they drifted back into the shadows, still watching me. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Before I could think, they lifted one finger to their lips in a gesture of silence and turned away, disappearing down the sidewalk as the bus doors closed with a soft thud. I looked back at the bus. The tall man was settling into a seat. The elderly woman had found a spot behind him, and the bus driver was watching me. My instincts screamed at me to stay away, but my mind argued that I needed to go. I took a deep breath, thanked the driver, and climbed onto the bus. I chose a seat by the window and sat down. As the bus moved forward, I watched the stranger step away from the stop. They walked toward the darker corner of the street, disappearing from view as the bus turned left around the block. The world felt slightly off-balanced, like a painting hung crooked on a wall. I gripped the edge of my bag and stared at the empty sidewalk where they had stood only moments before. The ride on bus 22 felt different that morning. The buildings and streets I had seen countless times looked strange and unfamiliar. Every turn the bus made felt like an echo, repeating some warning I could not fully understand. I gripped the edge of my bag and stared at the back of the seat in front of me. Other passengers sat peacefully. Some read books or stared out the window. No one seemed to notice my tension. I thought of the stranger's words. "Don't get on bus 22. I tried to push the thought away and focus on my breathing. I counted silently, 1, 2, 3, hoping to anchor myself in the present. But the more I tried to calm down, the louder my thoughts became. What if the stranger knew something dangerous was going to happen on this route? What if something terrible awaited me beyond the next bend? As the bus moved toward downtown, I reached the main square. Suddenly, the bus ahead of us, another bus 22, passed by in the opposite direction. Its windows reflected the bright morning light. I saw a large crowd gathering on the sidewalk ahead. The bus driver slowed down, then came to a halt. People on my bus began to murmur and shift in their seats. I looked out the window and saw the crowd had grown bigger than before. Some people pointed and moved quickly. I caught a glimpse of flashing lights and heard sirens in the distance. Curious and still shaken, I stood up and walked to the front of the bus, pressing my face against the glass. In that moment, I realized my life had changed forever. The bus driver turned in his seat to address the passengers. "There has been an accident up ahead," he said calmly. "A fire in a building near the station. The fire spread to the power lines. The entire block is closed off for safety. I'm sorry for the delay. We will need to take a detour. Please stay calm." I felt my stomach drop. I remembered the stranger's warning again. How could they have known about this? The fire seemed to start only moments ago. I tried to focus on the present. The red and orange flames, the thick smoke billowing into the sky, the frantic voices of people rushing to safety. I watched as firefighters worked quickly, spraying water from hoses. The heat was intense, and I could feel it even from inside the bus. I pressed my hand against the cool glass of the window and sighed. People on the bus talked in low voices. Some were worried about loved ones who might be near the fire. Others were upset because they would be late for work. A woman sitting across from me cradled her phone in both hands. She stared at it with wide eyes and began to cry softly. Someone offered her a tissue, and she dabbed at her eyes. The tension in the bus was like a thick fog that made it hard to breathe. I closed my eyes and tried to calm my breathing. I thought about my meeting and decided to call my manager to explain the delay. I pulled out my phone and dialed. My heart felt heavy as I waited for someone to answer. When my manager, Emma, picked up, I spoke quickly. "Hello?" "Hi, Emma, it's me. I'm on the bus, but there's a fire on my usual route. The road is closed and I'm stuck. I will be late to the meeting. I'm sorry." Emma's voice was calm but concerned. That's okay, you're safe. Just get here as soon as you can. We will start without you, but we can fill you in. Don't worry about it. I thanked her, hung up, and slipped my phone back into my bag. I took a moment to look at the people around me. Each person had their own story. Some were friends comforting each other. Others sat alone, lost in their thoughts. A teenage boy stared at his phone, shaking his head. Maybe he had seen something about the fire on social media. The bus driver found a detour through narrow streets. We moved slowly, turning down one street after another, guided by his knowledge of the city. We passed small cafes and shops. A few people on the sidewalks looked at the bus and pointed. I wondered if they had seen the stranger. Could that person have known about this before it happened? I shook my head, but the question remained. The memory of the whisper echoed in my mind. For a moment, I felt grateful for that warning. But part of me still felt uncertain. What did the stranger hope to achieve? Was it a random act of kindness, or did the person have another plan? I closed my eyes and allowed my thoughts to drift, but I could not find clear answers. Instead, I focused on watching the city pass by outside the window. At a small bus stop just a few blocks from my office, the driver announced our arrival. "Downtown Square," he said. I gathered my bag and stood up. Other passengers stood as well, ready to leave. I thanked the driver and stepped off the bus. The street was blocked by police tape, and firefighters were hosing down the remains of the building. I could feel the heat even from where I stood. Ash and soot covered the air, and the smell of smoke was strong. A few people stood behind the tape, watching the fire trucks and police cars. Some took photos or videos. Others simply stood in silence, staring at the charred remains of what once had been a small factory. The sight was both terrifying and sad. As I walked, I replayed the events in my mind. The warning, the stranger, the accident. It all connected in a strange way that I could not explain. I wondered if someone had tipped the stranger off about the fire before it happened. But that seemed impossible. Who would warn me? Perhaps it was fate guiding me to make a choice. Maybe the stranger wanted to change my destiny, if only for a day. I closed my eyes and shook my head to clear my thoughts. The entrance to my office building came into view. Smiling faces welcomed me briefly as I passed the security desk. I took the elevator to the 5th floor, and inside, I felt a sense of relief. I had made it, despite the delay. At the office, some of my colleagues greeted me with polite smiles. They knew about the fire from the news, and they asked if I was okay. I assured them I was fine and took a seat at my desk. My computer screen lit up with emails and messages. I opened the email about the meeting and saw the notes they had prepared. I began reviewing them, trying to focus on the tasks at hand. The phone on my desk rang, and I answered. It was my friend Sarah. She had heard about the fire and wanted to make sure I was safe. "I'm okay, thanks," I said. "It is scary, but no one was hurt. I am a bit late for work, but I will catch up." Sarah sighed with relief. "That's good. The news said the fire was bad. Be careful if you go out today." "I will. Thanks for checking," I replied. I hung up the phone and took a sip of water. The cool liquid felt refreshing as it went down my throat. My heart was still racing from the morning's events, but I felt stronger now. I turned back to my computer and continued my work. The meeting started 20 minutes later, and I joined, via video call. My manager introduced me, and I explained what had happened. The meeting went well, and I contributed ideas despite the rough morning. After the meeting, I took a moment to think about the stranger at the bus stop. I replayed the whisper in my mind. Don't get on bus 22. If I had not boarded the bus when I did, I would have been on the streets near the fire. I might have been caught in the chaos. I shivered at the thought. The stranger, whoever he or she was, had saved me from a dangerous situation. I felt gratitude mixed with curiosity. I wondered if I would thank the person or find them to understand more. For now, I had work to do, so I turned back to my desk and focused on the tasks at hand. Still, the memory lingered like a shadow at the edge of my mind. I sat at my desk and arranged my papers. The office had a familiar smell of coffee, printer ink, and the faint scent of fresh paint on the walls. The walls were a soft light gray, decorated with a few motivational posters. One read, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." Another showed a bright sunrise over a mountain with the words, "Rise and shine." These posters always reminded me that each day offered a new chance. I turned my head slowly and looked at my reflection in the dark surface of my laptop screen. My face still looked tense, and I felt a knot of nerves in my stomach. I tried to focus on my breathing and let the rhythm of the office surround me. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of tasks and phone calls. I updated my reports, answered emails, and spoke with clients. Each task felt mundane compared to the strange events of the morning. Yet, I tried to focus. By noon, I felt exhausted. Not because of the work, but because of the tension in my mind. I stood up and stretched. My back ached from hours of sitting. I decided to take a short break and walk to the small kitchen area to refill my water bottle. A coworker, Mark, saw me and waved. "Hey, are you all right?" he asked, noticing the fatigue on my face. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a rough morning?" "I heard about the fire," Mark said. "That's scary. Are you sure you are okay?" "Yes, I'm okay," I replied. "Thanks for asking." We chatted for a minute about the weather and the latest sports news. It was a simple conversation, but I welcomed the distraction. I took a deep breath and felt the tension in my shoulders ease slightly. After a moment, I returned to my desk. The email notifications kept popping up, but I felt more focused. I spent the next hour working on a presentation for a new project. My fingers tapped on the keyboard as I typed slides of text and arranged charts. The sound of typing felt comforting, like a steady drumbeat in my mind. By 2 o'clock, I was ready for lunch. I packed my bag and left the office building. The air outside was cooler now, and a light breeze brushed my face. The city felt different after the fire. The roads near the burned building were still blocked, and barricades had been set up. Crowds gathered near the site, and some people took photos or filmed with their phones. Fire trucks and police cars lined the street, their lights flashing even though the day was bright. I shook my head as I walked past. I wanted to move on, but the sight stayed with me. The contrast between the calm of my office and the chaos of the fire felt surreal. I decided to visit a small cafe a few blocks away. It was a quiet place with wooden tables and chairs, and light jazz music playing in the background. I ordered a sandwich and tea and took a seat near the window. As I sipped my tea, I tried to relax. I looked out at the street and saw people walking by, some with hurried steps, others moving at a leisurely pace. Children played on the sidewalk, laughing and chasing each other. The contrast between the innocence of the children and the chaos of the fire scene earlier felt striking. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the warmth of the tea soothe me. The ceramic cup felt smooth in my hands, and the steam rose gently into the air. While I was eating, I reviewed the events of the morning in my mind. I thought of the stranger, and the strange whisper that had saved me. I tried to reconstruct every detail I remembered. The coat the stranger wore was too heavy for spring, as if it belonged to a colder season. The hood hid their face completely, and I could only see the faint outline of their jaw. Their voice was soft, almost a whisper, but carried a sense of urgency. The word "don't" sounded more like a command than a suggestion. Why had they used my name? How had they known it? I watched people pass by the cafe window, each one absorbed in their own world. Their conversations seemed so ordinary. It made me wonder what hidden stories each person carried. After finishing my lunch, I left the cafe and began the walk back to the office. I took a different route to avoid the blocked streets. I walked along a narrow alley that I had never used before. The buildings on either side were close together, with windows that looked into small apartments. Laundry hung from lines above, and the smell of fresh bread drifted from a bakery at the end of the alley. Once I returned to my desk, I spent the afternoon working on a project that involved reviewing a new marketing plan. I shared ideas with my team and offered suggestions on how to improve our approach. My mind was clear now, and I appreciated the normalcy of my work. Yet the stranger at the bus stop remained on my mind. I wondered if I would ever see that person again. I opened my calendar to check my schedule for the next few days. I had to attend a conference on Friday, and I reminded myself to prepare my notes. I wrote a quick list on a sticky note. Review slides, practice speech, check travel time. The simple act of writing helped bring me back to the present. Around 5 o'clock, I finished my work and prepared to leave the office. The sun was lower in the sky, and the light had turned golden. I left the building and walked toward the bus stop. I decided to avoid the main road and take a small side street. The city at this hour had a different energy. People rushed home, tired from the day's work. Some stopped at small shops to buy groceries or snacks. Street lights flickered on as the daylight dimmed. I returned to the bus stop that I used each morning and glanced at the timetable. The next bus 22 would arrive at 5:30. I still had about 10 minutes to wait. I leaned against the signpost and watched the street. The glow of the setting sun reflected off the windows of the buildings. The air was cool and refreshing. I closed my eyes for a moment and listened to the sounds of the city, the distant honk of a car, the murmur of voices, and the flutter of birds as they flew overhead. I tried to calm my thoughts and focus on the present. The memory of the stranger's words lingered, but I tried not to dwell on it. At exactly 5:30, the bus engine rumbled in the distance. The bus emerged from around the corner and slowly approached the stop. I felt my pulse quicken as the bus pulled up. I thought of my morning journey and the strange events that had unfolded. I glanced around to see if anyone else noticed my unease, but the other people at the stop looked calm. A young man with a guitar case leaned against the bench, and an elderly man fiddled with his cane. Another woman adjusted her scarf and checked her phone. None of them seemed aware of what I had experienced. Taking a deep breath, I stepped onto the bus, walked past the driver, and said hello. He nodded, and I found a seat near the front. The bus door closed behind me, and we moved off down the road. I settled into my seat and looked at the reflections in the window. The streetlights began to glow like tiny stars, and the shadows of trees flickered on the pavement. Each turn of the wheel reminded me of how small moments can change everything. I felt grateful for that stranger, even though I did not know who they were or why they had warned me. The city passed by in a blur. Storefronts, parked cars, and pedestrians crossing the street. The bus climbed a small hill, and I saw the familiar red brick building where my apartment was located. The day had taken me from the ordinary to the extraordinary and back again. I knew I would never forget the feeling of the strange warning, the fear it brought, and the relief I felt when I saw the fire. My mind buzzed with questions that had no answers. When the bus reached my stop, I stood up and thanked the driver. I stepped onto the sidewalk and looked around. The evening air was cool and smelled of rain. Dark clouds gathered in the sky, and I could see distant flashes of lightning. I walked toward the building, my footsteps echoing on the wet pavement from a brief afternoon drizzle. The streetlights flickered on and cast long shadows. I pulled my coat tighter around me and looked up at the sky. The atmosphere felt tense, as if the world was holding its breath. I entered the apartment building and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. My apartment door felt warm under my hand as I unlocked it. Inside, my home was tidy and welcoming. The living room had a comfortable sofa, a small coffee table with a few books, and a soft rug on the floor. A lamp in the corner gave off a soft yellow light. I set my bag down and walked to the window. Outside, thunder rumbled and rain began to fall in gentle sheets. The sound of rain against the window was calming. I slipped out of my shoes and walked to the kitchen to make dinner. I heated up some leftovers from last night, pasta with tomato sauce and a small side salad. As the food warmed in the microwave, I thought of the stranger's warning and the fire. I wondered if the person was safe, and whether they had moved on to help someone else. I felt a deep sense of connection, as if I had met someone who cared without expecting anything in return. I sat at the kitchen table and ate slowly, savoring each bite. As I prepared for bed, I laid out my clothes for the next day and brushed my teeth. My reflection in the bathroom mirror stared back at me, and I saw a face that looked both shaken and determined. I turned off the bathroom light and walked down the hallway to my bedroom. The bed was neatly made, and I climbed under the covers. The sheets felt cool against my skin. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling, listening to the last rumble of thunder. Before drifting off to sleep, I thought of the next day. I would wake up and walk to the bus stop, and I would be on that bus again. I wondered if the stranger would return. I wondered if I would ever see that person again. I wondered what other surprises life had in store. With these thoughts, I closed my eyes and let sleep take me. The next morning arrived quietly. I woke to the sound of rain tapping against my window. The sky was gray and heavy with clouds, and the air felt cool and fresh. I lay in bed for a moment, listening to the raindrops, and thought about the events of the day before. The fire, the stranger's warning, and the strange relief I felt when I reached work safely, all of it played over again in my mind. I wondered if I had been lucky or if someone had guided me. After a few minutes of lingering in bed, I pushed back the covers, swung my legs over the edge, and stood up. My feet touched the soft carpet, and I stretched, feeling the muscles in my back loosen. I walked to the window, pulled aside the curtain, and watched the rain fall in pale sheets. The street below was nearly empty, save for a few cars driving slowly. Their tires created puddles that splashed against the curb. I closed the window and walked into the bathroom to begin my normal routine. brushing my teeth, splashing cold water on my face, and looking at my reflection. The same tired eyes stared back, but today they held a touch of curiosity and determination. I thought of the stranger's warning, "Don't get on bus 22. Those words had changed my day yesterday. Today I had a choice: return to my normal routine or try something different. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that life was full of unexpected turns. With that in mind, I left the bathroom and went to the kitchen. In the kitchen, the kettle hissed softly as water boiled for my tea. I reached for a mug and placed a tea bag inside, waiting as hot water poured over it. The steam curled in the air, and the familiar aroma of black tea filled the small space. I made a quick breakfast, 2 slices of toast with butter and jam, and sat at the table, warming my hands on the mug. The rain pattered against the roof, and the gentle glow of the overhead light cast a warm circle on the tabletop. I took a sip of tea and savored its warmth, thinking of the day ahead. My mind turned to the stranger and that whispered warning. I questioned whether I should avoid bus 22 again or if it was safe today. The memory of yesterday's fire made me wary. Maybe there was a larger pattern I could not see. My meeting at work today started later than usual, giving me some flexibility in my morning. I finished my toast, rinsed my plate, and took a final sip of tea. The day felt like a new page, waiting to be written. I washed my mug, dried my hands, and picked up my bag, which felt heavier with the weight of uncertainty and possibility. Before leaving my apartment, I checked my phone. The screen lit up with notifications, messages from friends and emails from work. But the one that caught my attention was an alert about a small traffic accident on my usual route. A car had collided with a pole near the main street, causing a minor electrical outage in the neighborhood. Local news said repairs would take a few hours, and traffic may be disrupted. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. The stranger's warning echoed again in my mind. Don't get on bus 22. It seemed the universe was giving me signs. The accident on my route might delay me even more if I took bus 22. I felt a flicker of nervous excitement. Perhaps this was a chance to trust my instincts. With a firm nod to myself, I grabbed my coat and umbrella, slipped on my shoes, and stepped out into the hallway. I locked the door behind me and headed downstairs. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle, and the world outside looked fresh and quiet, as if waiting for something to happen. The walk to the bus stop was different under the gray sky. The air was cool and smelled of wet pavement. I pulled my coat tighter around me and tilted my umbrella to shield my face from the light drizzle. The pavement was slick, and I moved carefully to avoid slipping. I passed the same shops and cafes I saw every day, but today they felt subdued, their windows misted with rain. A few early risers rushed by, their umbrellas bobbing like small mushrooms, their heads down against the weather. The street lamps cast a soft glow on the wet asphalt, creating golden reflections that shimmered under each step. I arrived at the bus stop a few minutes before 7, and only a couple of people were waiting. A young woman in a bright yellow raincoat stood with her back to me, and a middle-aged man in a dark suit checked his watch impatiently. I took a deep breath and reached into my bag for a small notebook. I had started jotting down thoughts after yesterday's events to make sense of the stranger's warning and my reactions. I flipped to a fresh page and scribbled a few words: choice, instinct, consequence. Then I closed the notebook and slipped it back into my bag as the sound of tires on wet pavement grew louder. When the bus came into view, I felt a familiar pang of hesitation. It was bus 22, approaching the stop slowly, its headlights glinting through the rain. I watched as the driver pulled up, opened the doors, and glanced at the waiting passengers. My heart beat faster. The collected morning tension from yesterday seemed to gather again. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other. The driver's eyes met mine briefly through the glass partition. He gave a polite nod. Suddenly, a quiet voice spoke behind me. Bus 22 stops here? I turned to see the young woman in the yellow raincoat. Her hair was damp, and she had a gentle smile that seemed oddly familiar. Yes, I said, my voice calm but steady. It's the usual bus to the city center. She thanked me and stepped forward to board. The middle-aged man followed, paying his fare quickly. When my turn came, I hesitated just a moment, then shook my head and stepped aside. I watched as the bus doors closed without me. The bus drove off, its red taillights disappearing into the morning haze. I felt a rush of adrenaline and relief, as I realized I had chosen not to get on bus 22, trusting the memory of yesterday's warning. For a moment I stood alone at the bus stop, rain falling lightly on my umbrella. I felt a grin spread across my face, a mix of fear and excitement for what might come next. I opened my wallet and checked the bus schedule on the stop sign. Bus 30 arrived in 5 minutes. This bus went in a different direction, looping through parts of the city I had never seen on my regular commute. I felt a thrill of adventure at the thought of exploring these unfamiliar streets. The rain had slowed even more now, almost stopped, and the clouds above were beginning to thin. It felt as if the world had paused to watch my decision. I stepped away from the curb and leaned against the pole, waiting for bus 30. My mind raced with possibilities. Would I be late to work? Yes, probably. But after yesterday's stretching of fate, I felt I could handle a bit of tardiness. In the distance, I heard the hum of an approaching engine. My pulse quickened as bus 30, painted in bright blue and white, turned the corner and came toward me. The driver began to slow as he neared the stop. I lifted my hand to hail him, and he nodded, opening the doors for me. As I climbed aboard, I took a deep breath and smiled. I had chosen a different path, one that might lead to something unexpected. Walking down the aisle of bus 30, I noticed the interior was cleaner and newer than bus 22. The bright overhead lights made the seats look crisp and inviting. I paid my fare and chose a seat near the window. As I sat down, the bus jerked forward and began its route. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching the blur of buildings and streets as we rolled through the city. The neighborhoods were different from the ones I knew. Small boutiques with colorful awnings lined the sidewalks, and cafes had umbrellas outside, their tables empty in the morning drizzle. I saw murals painted on building walls, vibrant images of people dancing, of flowers and abstract shapes, telling stories I could not yet understand. Children walked to school, their backpacks heavy, gossiping and laughing with each other. A street musician played a soft tune on a saxophone under an awning, the notes drifting gently through the open window of the bus. For a moment, the unfamiliar sight of these streets filled me with wonder. I felt as if I had stepped into a new, hidden part of the city, one that existed only for those who dared to take a different bus. My heart felt light, and I leaned back, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the bus's motion rock me gently. After a few stops, the bus left the main road and turned onto a narrower street. The pavement was rougher here, with cracks filled by patches of gray asphalt. The buildings were older, with wrought iron balconies above windows that held flower boxes. Curtains fluttered in the breeze, and I glimpsed people sitting at small tables, sipping coffee and reading newspapers. A bakery with a sign reading, Panaderia El Alba, displayed fresh bread in the window. The aroma of baking bread seemed to waft gently through the bus window. A small grocery store stood next door, its entrance flanked by racks of colorful fruits and vegetables. The scene felt warm and welcoming, and for a moment I forgot my worries about work or the stranger's warning. The bus stopped, and a few passengers got off, leaving empty seats behind. I took the chance to lean forward and look out the front windshield. The driver, a middle-aged man with silver hair and a friendly face, navigated the winding road with ease. He glanced at the small monitor displaying the route ahead, then at the rearview mirror, giving a quick nod to another passenger who had boarded earlier. I wondered where this route would end and what hidden treasures of the city lay at its terminus. The bus continued, climbing a small hill and then descending into a valley lined with trees. The morning sun, which had been hidden by clouds, now peeked through, casting warm beams onto the road. The trees created a tunnel of green, their leaves dancing in the soft breeze. I watched as a family of ducks waddled across a small footbridge over a creek, their webbed feet making faint splashes. The sight felt peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of yesterday. As the bus moved on, I saw an old stone church with a bell tower rising above the trees. The bell tolled softly, marking the hour. I felt a sense of serenity wash over me. If fate had brought me here, perhaps I was meant to see this peaceful place. The bus stopped briefly to let off a few passengers near the church, and I noticed a sign pointing toward a small park by the creek. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and people strolled along a path, some walking dogs, others jogging. I felt a tug in my chest, as if this unexpected route was offering me a gift of calm and reflection. As the bus left the church area, we entered a neighborhood of small houses painted in pastel colors, pinks, blues, yellows, and each one had a tiny garden in front. A woman tended to her roses, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, humming a tune softly as she worked. A young father played catch with his son in a small yard. I smiled at these simple, joyful scenes unfolding before me. The warmth of the sun was stronger now, drying the remnants of rain on the leaves and sidewalks. The bus passed a school playground, where children shouted and chased each other on a field of bright green grass. The sound of their laughter drifted through the open bus window. I felt unexpectedly grateful for the delay. If I had taken bus 22, I would never have seen this side of the city. The thought made me wonder what else I was missing by sticking to my usual routine. I leaned back in my seat, soaking in the new sights and sounds, feeling a sense of adventure I had not felt in years. After nearly 20 minutes on the bus, the driver announced the final stops. Next stop, Central Market. Final stop, Riverside Station. I realized I had no clue where Riverside Station was or how it connected to my office. My phone battery was low, and I had not brought my charger. Panic flickered briefly. Would I be able to find my way back? I looked around. A few older passengers held grocery bags, and a teenage girl sat reading a book quietly. The last stop seemed far removed from the hustle of downtown. I decided to get off at Central Market and figure out the rest of my journey. I tapped the bell overhead, and the bus slowed. As I stepped down onto the platform, the scent of fresh fruits and spices greeted me. The market was bustling with vendors setting up their stalls, colorful piles of oranges, apples, and bananas, baskets of tomatoes, mounds of rice and beans. The air was alive with chatter as shopkeepers greeted customers, and the sound of scales weighing produce rang softly in the background. I closed my umbrella and looked around, trying to decide which way to go next. Taking a deep breath, I chose a path through the market on the left side. The ground underfoot was a mixture of stone and concrete, worn smooth by years of foot traffic. Stalls lined both sides of the walkway, and the vendors called out to customers in lively voices, advertising their wares. A fishmonger displayed the day's catch on a bed of ice, and the smell of fresh fish mixed with that of spices from a nearby spice vendor. I weaved carefully through the crowd, trying not to step on the fruits displayed on low tables. A vendor, selling hand-woven baskets, smiled at me and waved a wide-brimmed hat overhead, shading himself from the bright sun. I returned the wave politely and continued on, my senses alight with new sights, sounds, and smells. I had never visited Central Market before, and I felt as though I had stepped into another world. The energy was contagious. It made me wonder if I had more adventures ahead before I reached my office. After passing through a narrow lane in the market, I emerged onto a broader street lined with small shops and cafes. The sign above one cafe read, "Coffee and Conversation," and I saw a few people sitting outside, sipping lattes and chatting. Further down, a shop displayed handmade jewelry in its window, and I glimpsed delicate bracelets adorned with colorful beads. Across the street, a small bookstore had tables outside stacked with paperback novels. A chalkboard sign read, "Morning. Specials, coffee and a croissant." I paused, glancing at my watch. It was nearly 9 o'clock, and my meeting was scheduled for 9:30. I estimated it would take me at least 30 minutes to navigate back to the office from here. Anxiety crept in. What if I missed the meeting entirely? I took a deep breath, reminding myself that the detour had brought unexpected wonders. Maybe this perspective of the city would help me later in life, even if I was late. I continued walking, keeping the bright sky and lively street in view. The bustle of Central Market faded behind me as I followed the street signs toward the nearest subway station, which would take me downtown quickly. The walk to the subway station took me through a small residential area. The houses here were modest and orderly, each with a small front yard bordered by low hedges. Some had flower beds with daisies and lavender, their colors vivid against the green. I passed a group of elderly men talking on a bench near a corner store, their conversation punctuated by laughter and the occasional exclamation. A teenager on a skateboard zipped past, weaving between pedestrians until he reached a smooth patch of sidewalk where he paused to practice tricks. The diversity of life in this neighborhood struck me. Everyone seemed absorbed in their own small world. I checked the street signs and saw that the station was only 2 blocks away. As I approached the station entrance, I felt a sense of relief, mixed with accomplishment. I had ventured far from my usual path and collected memories I never expected. Descending the steps to the station, I passed a green sign indicating trains to downtown center, next stop Red Line. I bought a ticket from a machine, feeling the rough plastic of coins in my hand as I inserted them. I slipped the ticket into the turnstile and the gates swung open. The steps led to a platform where I waited for the next train. The station was cool, its air conditioned and echoing with the distant hum of an escalator. I leaned against a pillar and checked my reflection in a glass panel. My hair was damp from the rain, and my coat had a few water spots, but I felt energized. A train arrived with a whoosh, its doors opening to reveal cars painted in bright red. I boarded and found an empty seat near the window. The train jerked forward and we began moving. I felt a sense of wonder at how easily I could traverse the city when I chose to look beyond my routine. During the ride, I glanced at the other passengers. A young couple held hands, speaking softly to each other. A businessman typed furiously on his laptop, oblivious to the world around him. An elderly woman knitted a scarf, her needles clicking in a steady rhythm. Each person had their own story and their own destination. I stared out the window as the train passed through underground tunnels, the lights overhead flickering briefly as we entered darker sections. I closed my eyes and let the motion lull me for a moment. The unfamiliar route from home to work felt like a journey of discovery. When the train emerged from the tunnel into a station with skylights, sunlight flooded in, illuminating the platform. I realized this had to be Central Station for the Red Line. I gathered my bag and stepped off the train. Walking up the escalator to ground level, I emerged into the busy foyer of Central Station. Commuters rushed around, some heading toward buses, others toward taxis or nearby shops. Signs pointed toward different exits. I followed the one for City Center Main Office District. I found myself on a bustling street lined with tall office buildings, their glass windows reflecting the bright morning light. Cars, buses, and taxis moved steadily along the road, and pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks. The contrast between the quiet of Central Market and the energy here was striking. I made my way down the sidewalk, passing a newsstand where a vendor called out headlines. Further ahead, a row of food trucks offered snacks and coffee for busy workers. The crisp, clean architecture of this district felt familiar. I had taken Bus 22 through these streets many times. Yet today I saw them from a different perspective, directly on foot, after a detour that showed me hidden corners of the city. I checked my watch again. It was 9:20. I still had time to reach my office building, which was only a few blocks away. I walked at a steady pace, weaving between people who moved with purpose. A light breeze carried the scent of fresh pastries from a bakery on the corner. I passed a statue of a famous city founder, its plaque reading, "In honor of those who build new paths." I paused for a moment, feeling the words resonate. My morning had been about building a new path, no longer confined to the usual commute. I continued walking, and soon the glass doors of my office building came into view. I pushed through the revolving door, feeling the cool air conditioning wash over me. The familiar lobby greeted me, marble floors, potted plants, and a security desk where a friendly guard waved. I nodded in return, took the elevator to the 5th floor, and stepped off. My desk was waiting, papers neatly stacked, computer screen glowing with pending messages. Despite being 20 minutes late, my manager and team greeted me kindly. The meeting was underway, and they welcomed me to join. I quickly found a chair and pulled up my notes on the projector screen. I realized that although I had been late, I felt more alive and inspired than ever. The detour had given me stories to share, new observations to bring to our discussion. When my turn came to speak, I shared my ideas with confidence. My colleagues listened, and the meeting continued smoothly. Afterward, Emma, my manager, pulled me aside and said, "I'm glad you're here safe. You look different, more energized somehow. Everything okay?" I smiled and nodded. "Yes," I said. "The morning was unusual, but good. I think I needed it." She patted my shoulder in understanding and returned to her desk. I sat at mine and opened my notebook, writing a quick note. Today, chose new path, found hidden parts of city, learned that unexpected changes can lead to discovery. I closed the notebook and turned to my computer, feeling grateful for the morning's journey. Later in the afternoon, I took a short break and walked to a small cafe near our office, one I had never visited before. I ordered a latte and sat by the window, watching the steady flow of people cross the busy street. The sky had cleared, and the sun shone brightly, casting long shadows of trees onto the pavement. I sipped my latte slowly, letting the warmth comfort me. I thought of the stranger and that simple warning. Don't get on bus 22. That whisper had changed everything. It had led me away from danger yesterday and toward an unexpected adventure today. I wondered who that stranger was and why they cared enough to speak my name. I mulled over the idea that sometimes help comes from unknown sources, at the precise moment we need it. My mind wandered to the small park by the creek, the stone church, and the bustling market. Places I might never have known existed had I not taken that different bus. The richness of those experiences made me realize how much lies beyond our routines, waiting for us if we dare to step off the beaten path. Returning to the office, I felt a calm satisfaction as I finished my work assignments. The day's tasks felt lighter, as if the adventure I had that morning carried me gently through the afternoon. Before leaving work, I packed my bag and checked my phone. A message from my friend David popped up. Heard about the fire and your detour. Crazy morning. Are you okay? I typed back, I'm fine, thanks. It was strange, but I think I see things differently now. He replied with a smiley emoji and said, glad to hear it. Let's catch up soon. I set my phone aside and shut down my computer. As I stood, I felt gratitude for the new perspective I had gained. I left the office and stepped into the bustling street once more. The city felt familiar, yet changed. Its rhythms and patterns now mixed with the memory of places I had discovered. I began walking toward the bus stop. But today I knew I would ask the stranger's question. Bus 22 stops here? And then choose again, trusting my instincts and the map of possibilities that had opened before me. When I reached the bus stop, a young man in a red jacket stood waiting, headphones in his ears, bobbing his head to music I could not hear. The timetable showed bus 22 arriving in 10 minutes. I felt a flicker of uncertainty, but then I remembered the thrill of what morning's detour had given me. New sights, new people, and a story to tell. The next bus, bus 30, would come in 15 minutes. I reached into my bag and pulled out my notebook, flipping to the last page where I had written, New path, new discoveries. I nodded to myself, closed the notebook, and stood patiently at the curb. As the rain clouds drifted away and the sun dipped low in the sky, I realized that my life was richer for taking that second chance. I watched the sun's reflection dance on the pavement, feeling contentment and the quiet anticipation of what tomorrow might bring. The sun dipped low behind the buildings, and the street lamps cast long shadows as I stood at the bus stop, watching the sky turn from orange to deep blue. I felt the lingering warmth of the late afternoon breeze on my face, and thought of how different my life had become over the past 2 days. Just yesterday morning, I had felt an unshakable chill when that stranger whispered my name and told me, "Don't get on bus 22." Now, standing here as evening approached, I felt a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. Should I board bus 22 as I normally would, or should I wait for bus 30 again? My heart pounded with the memory of the fires, the detours, and the hidden parts of the city I discovered. Finally, with a deep breath, I looked at the bus schedule taped to the pole. Bus 22 would arrive in 5 minutes. Bus 30 wouldn't come for 10. I closed my eyes and listened to the soft hum of cars on the wet pavement, the distant chatter of people heading home, and the faint sound of children playing in a nearby park. I remembered how bus 30 led me to new adventures, hidden markets, friendly neighborhoods, and unexpected encounters. Trusting that memory, I stepped back from the curb and decided to wait for bus 30. The minutes felt both long and short as I leaned against the pole, feeling the breeze swirl around me. At last, I heard the soft rumble of an engine, and the blue and white bus 30 turned the corner. The driver, a middle-aged man with silver hair and kind eyes, nodded as I climbed aboard. My palms tingled with excitement. I felt as though I was choosing life again, trying something new instead of sticking to my old routine. Once I found a seat by the window, the bus jerked forward and began its familiar route through the winding side streets. The city around me glowed with evening lights, cafe windows flickering with warm yellow light, neon signs above small shops, and car headlights reflecting on the damp road. I watched people in doorways huddle under umbrellas or hurry down sidewalks with briefcases and shopping bags. The rhythms of their lives felt different from mine, yet connected by the same network of streets and buildings. As the bus moved, I thought of how much I had missed when I always took bus 22 without question. Now, each time I passed a new storefront or an alley painted with colorful murals, I felt a sense of wonder. The memory of the stranger's whisper still haunted me, though it no longer frightened me. It had become a guide, prompting me to see beyond the familiar. I imagined what the stranger saw when they watched me hesitate at the bus stop. Maybe concern, or maybe a reminder that life could surprise us at any moment. Whatever their intention, I felt grateful that I had responded with curiosity rather than fear. After a few stops, the bus climbed a small hill where the street narrowed between old brick buildings. The overhead lights flickered on as dusk settled in. I noticed a familiar sight, a small bookstore with a green and white awning, pages open, and coffee, where I had stopped the day before and seen tables stacked with paperback novels. This time, the shop's front window displayed a sign reading, "Evening Storytelling Event, 7 p.m." The clock on my phone showed it was already 6:45 p.m. Had I really stumbled into another unexpected adventure? I hesitated for a moment, glancing at the driver in the rearview mirror and then tapped the bell. The bus slowed, and I stepped off at a small stop near the bookstore. As I walked toward the entrance, the sound of a soft acoustic guitar drifted from inside, and I could hear a few voices gathered around low tables with coffee cups and pastries. A chalkboard sign outside read, "All welcome, tonight's theme, New Beginnings." My heart skipped a beat. The coincidences of these past 2 days felt like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. I pushed open the door and walked inside. The interior of Pages and Coffee was warm and inviting. Wooden beams lined the low ceiling, and bookshelves filled with well-loved paperbacks covered the walls. A few small lamps on side tables cast pools of soft light across the room, and the smell of fresh coffee and baked pastries lingered in the air. Near the back, a small stage was set with a microphone, a stool, and a single hanging lantern. A seat at the front row was empty, and I chose it. The woman on stage, a storyteller with an easy smile, welcomed everyone, introduced herself as Lena, and asked each person to share where they were from. When my turn came, I rose slowly and said, "I'm from the city, but I haven't lived here long. I take bus 22 to work every day." Several people nodded politely, and I felt the flush of embarrassment but also relief that I wasn't the only newcomer. I sat down and waited, watching as the storyteller began to speak. She started with a simple question. "Has anyone here ever taken the wrong path and then discovered something wonderful because of it?" Her eyes scanned the audience, and I felt a wave of recognition. That was exactly my story. The storyteller spoke softly, weaving a tale of a young traveler who, by missing his train, found a small village where he discovered a hidden talent he never knew he had. The audience listened in silence, leaning forward to catch every word. The story was simple, but it carried a sense of warmth and hope. I felt tears spring to my eyes as I realized how much my own few days mirrored that lesson. When my journey took an unexpected turn, when I listened to a stranger's whisper and took bus 30, I did find something wonderful, a world beyond my routine. My heart pounded with emotion, and I realized that my story resonated with those gathered here. When the storyteller finished, she invited anyone who felt moved to share a brief reflection. I raised my hand, and when she called on me, I stood again. Yesterday, I began, my voice soft but clear. I was told not to get on my usual bus. At first, I was afraid, but then I chose another path, and I discovered parts of the city I never knew existed. Tonight, I see that sometimes the wrong path can lead to the right place. I returned to my seat as hands clapped gently across the room. A sense of connection filled me. I saw nods of understanding in the faces of strangers, and I realized I was not alone in fear or curiosity. Every person here had likely faced a choice that led them somewhere new. I left pages and coffee with a full heart, stepping back into the cool night air with a sense of peace I had not felt in a long time. The next morning, I woke to a soft gray sky and a few drops of rain dancing on the window pane. The events of yesterday, my participation in the storytelling event, felt like a dream, yet I carried their warmth with me as I prepared for the day. I brushed my teeth, splashed cool water on my face, and dressed quietly, mindful of the tension that used to grip me each morning. At 6:30, I made tea and toast, took a deep breath, and opened my apartment door. The hallway was calm, and I felt a quiet anticipation. As I walked down the stairs, I wondered if the stranger would appear again, or if fate had already shown me what I needed. At the street, the air smelled fresh after the rain. I closed my umbrella, folded it, and slipped it into my bag. The bus stop was 2 blocks away. My feet moved quickly, guided by the familiarity of the path I had taken so many times. Arriving at the bus stop, I saw a few early commuters waiting under the small shelter, a woman with a baby stroller, a man in a suit reading his phone, and, standing slightly apart, a figure in a familiar heavy coat with a hood. My heart skipped a beat. The stranger was there, but this time in the early morning light I could see something different. The hood was down, revealing a face lined with gentle wrinkles and kind eyes. The person held a battered backpack and wore a simple scarf. My legs trembled slightly as I approached. The stranger nodded once, just a slight movement of the chin in greeting. I swallowed hard and said softly, "Thank you." The stranger looked at me for a long moment, and then spoke in a clear voice. "You made the right choice." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. The stranger closed the distance between us and offered out a hand. "My name is Amir," he said. "I work at a cafe in the market you visited." I took his hand, feeling the warmth of his grasp. "I'm sorry I frightened you," he continued. "But yesterday I heard a warning on the radio about a power line that might fail on the route of bus 22. I knew you always took that bus around this time." I barely grabbed my coat and came running. His eyes held sincerity and concern. "I didn't know if you would listen," he said quietly. I felt overwhelmed as I looked at Amir's face. The stranger was not a ghost or a random figure. He was someone who cared enough to risk his own morning to save me from potential danger. I swallowed and managed to say, "Thank you for saving my life." He shook his head and smiled gently. I only did what any friend would do, he said simply. I glanced at the bus schedule. Bus 22 would arrive in 3 minutes. I realized that the moment of choice had arrived again. I glanced at Amir, at bus 22 approaching in the distance, and then back at him. His eyes urged me to make a decision that felt right for me. For a long moment I hesitated, feeling the pull of my old routine and the desire to follow Amir's advice. Finally, I nodded and said, I won't take bus 22. Amir's face softened and he placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Good, he said quietly. You'll find treasures on other paths. Then he stepped back toward the shelter as bus 22 slowed to a stop. I watched as he paid his fare, stepped on board, and took a seat near the back. The driver did not look twice. He simply closed the doors and drove off down the street. As bus 22 disappeared around the corner, I turned to look down the road for bus 30. The sky had brightened slightly and a few birds began to chirp in the trees overhead. I felt a surge of calm confidence. I did not need to fear my routine anymore because I had seen the world beyond it. I thought of the hidden bookstore, the peaceful park by the creek, the lively market, and the warm glow of pages and coffee. I understood that life's surprises often come when we trust ourselves and follow our instincts. I closed my umbrella and waited as a soft breeze carried the scent of wet pavement and fresh blossoms. 5 minutes later, bus 30 appeared and I climbed on board without hesitation. I smiled as I found my seat by the window, feeling the bus's familiar motion. As we rolled past the alleyways and neighborhood shops, I noticed a sign for the market where Amir had warned me. I pressed my forehead gently against the glass, breathing in the crisp morning air. The city rolled by in a blend of old and new, and I felt grateful for every road, both expected and unexpected, that had brought me here. When I arrived at my office, I carried with me the quiet knowledge that I was never truly alone on my journey. As I walked through the lobby, I saw colleagues rushing to their desks, laptops in hand, while others chatted in small groups. I wore a small, genuine smile and felt a sense of purpose. My manager, Emma, called out from across the room, "You look rested. Everything okay?" I nodded and replied, "Yes, I feel alive." She raised an eyebrow but did not pry. I walked to my desk, sat down, and opened my notebook, now filled with pages of notes reminding me that sometimes missing the bus leads to new beginnings. I logged into my computer and saw my email inbox full of messages awaiting my attention. I took a deep breath and began my work, but this time I felt something different. A gentle certainty that no matter where life's paths led me, familiar or unknown, I had the courage to choose, and I had friends like Amir who cared enough to watch over me. Later that evening, I returned home and found a small note slipped under my apartment door. It was a simple piece of paper with "Thank you" written in neat handwriting and signed, Amir. I smiled, folding the note carefully and placing it in my journal. I thought of everyone I had met, the stranger who became a friend, the people at Pages and Coffee who shared their stories, and the city itself, with all its hidden corners and surprises. Life, I realized, is made of moments. Some we plan, and some we do not. Each moment carries the potential to change our path, to teach us something new, or to bring us closer to those who watch over us. I sat on my bed and opened my window to the cool evening air. The sky was clear now, filled with stars that seemed to shine a little brighter than usual. I closed my eyes and let the quiet night speak to me. The rain had washed the city clean, and every street lamp glowed softly, guiding people home. I reached for my journal and wrote, "Today I learned that every choice creates a story worth telling. I will welcome the unknown." Then I lay down, the memory of the past day's adventures warm in my mind. As I drifted to sleep, I knew that, no matter which bus I took tomorrow, I would carry this lesson with me. And with that, I let the gentle rhythm of my breathing guide me into dreams where new stories awaited. Thank you for listening to this final part of the story. I hope that hearing about my journey and the choices I made helps you feel inspired to trust yourself and explore new paths in your own life. If you liked this story, please remember to like and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you listened from. Every day brings new adventures. Sometimes they start with a simple whisper. Good night, and until next time, keep listening and keep learning.